Doug and Rick, and I forget which one, maybe it was both, came in one day with this allegation that they had received from a source. If there's been promotional game fraud, it's nowhere near the scope and magnitude of McDonald's. Basically, the McDonald's Monopoly games were compromised and had been for years.
And then I did want to know, I think you've been asked this before, and I'm wondering if the answer has changed. Were there actually any legitimate winners? Today, I'm joined by Chris Graham, who is a former squad supervisor with the FBI.
Did a little bit of everything. People ask, "What did you do for the FBI?" And I say, just about everything you could do. But yeah, I mean, the bulk of it was as a squad supervisor in a couple different places.
Okay, so normally I don't go all the way back to the beginning because it's like, okay, so you go to training, you do this, you do that. However, with you, I do want to go back to your training days because apparently somebody joined you when you were in the academy to get, I don't know, training or exposure of their own. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. A long time ago. Thanks for bringing it up. So I'm in Quantico during new agents training way back in 1989, and we had a fairly high number of females in our new agents class. Out of about 44, I think total, there might have been 12, 15 females, which back then that was a pretty healthy number, certainly more than any of the other classes. So that kind of lays the groundwork. Well, one day we noticed some extra people kind of in the back of the class. Didn't really pay much attention to it because you're trying to pay attention to the instruction. We noticed those same people and a rather, I would say, unremarkable young lady with them in the gym. We were doing some sort of handcuffing training or something like that. And somebody said, "You know who that is?" He looked and it looks kind of familiar. They said, that's Jodie Foster, and prepping for a movie that came out soon, which I think won a bunch of awards. Anyway, yeah, so she went through a fair amount of the things that we did over several weeks. The one thing that, and I always tell this story because it comes to mind, if you watch Silence of the Lambs, which she was in, at one point when she's going through training, they're running through the woods on this thing. It's called the Yellow Brick Road. It's over at the Marine Corps base in Quantico. And there's rope climbs and running up and down hills and all this stuff. So we go out and run, and they kind of stagger start people based on your speed. She started out relatively early. At the very end, before you board the school bus to go back, there's a hill, and at the bottom of the hill is a stream, a small creek, which is filthy and muddy, and God knows what the Marines do upriver to it. Everybody who's real enthusiastic, they run through it, they get all muddy, they fall down. I was running behind her, and we were coming up to the creek, and I passed her before we got to the creek. Of course, I'm not going to get muddy. I jumped a few rocks, jumped over, ran up the hill. About halfway up the hill, I turned to look back, and she, I kid you not, ran right into the creek, into the mud, covered in mud, got up and ran up the hill. And I thought, for somebody who is an A-list Hollywood star to do that, I've ever since then, I was always impressed with her legitimacy, let's say. So yeah, that's the Quantico story. Yeah. And then the movie, of course, went where it went, and it was entertaining.
Well, I mean, it's an incredible movie. It's a classic. did win multiple Academy Awards, including, I believe, Best Picture, which is extremely rare for a movie that is borderline horror movie. I know it's technically probably a thriller suspense, but it's almost a horror movie, and that kind of movie doesn't usually win Best Picture. So no, it's storied existence there. So okay, so I did want to go back because I mean that's a unique story. And from there, your first assignment, I believe, was San Antonio, Texas. And while you were there, you got exposed to another, this would be some major, history here, the incident at Waco, from what I understand.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, I mean, I came into the FBI, I had a financial background. And so I really thought I would spend most of my days buried in bank records and accounting records. And we did some of that, but really was a lot more involved. And I always say that an office like San Antonio and the FBI for young people, it's kind of like high school, right? So, and I'll kind of explain it, because I'll explain why this Waco thing comes about. That's where I'm going with it. You have squads. It's kind of like homeroom. You come in the morning, everybody hangs around. There's a squad supervisor. He's like the teacher. Go out during the day, do your investigations, your surveillance, whatever you're going to do. It's kind of like going to class. And then you come back at the end of the day, 4:30, 5 o'clock, 5:30, rally up. It's like coming back to homeroom, right? And then there's a teacher. In the front of the office, there's a special agent in charge. That's like the principal. So if you get called up to the SAC's office, it's like getting called up to go see the principal. So where to me it's like high school is, then there's extracurricular activities, right? So in high school you have the band, you got the football team, you got the theater. Well, within the FBI, especially in an office like that, you have some of that too. So I say if you were, if you could run fast, shoot well, liked a little bit of excitement, didn't mind getting called out at night or on the weekend on your kid's birthday, you signed up for the SWAT team. Other people became evidence people. Other people became various outreach coordinators, whatnot. But the SWAT team was kind of like I would say almost like the football team of the office.
Was that part of HRT, or was it?
No, this was pre-HRT.
Okay.
So each field office had a SWAT team. So anyway, to get to your question and not use up all the film tape here. So one day on a Sunday, sitting in my, I was actually meeting with a source of all things on a Sunday morning, and on comes the TV, and it's the raid at Waco, where right on the TV screen we see ATF agents basically getting shot up on the roof of this compound up in Waco. Well, Waco was our northernmost satellite office in San Antonio. So San Antonio division covered almost all of South Texas on up to Waco. As this was playing on the screen, my pager went off, and little short message, meet on I-35, we knew what it was, head north, pack for 2 or 3 days. 53 some odd days later, we were still sleeping in cars and Bradley tanks, a couple hundred meters from the compound, and really quite just a crazy experience, and an experience that went from scary, terrifying to, and I don't want to make light of it because of the way it ended, but kind of fun and amusing in the middle, and then horribly tragic at the end and sad and how it ended.
I was in the Army, and would this be a fair description? I didn't see combat in the Army, but I know a lot of people who did. And they like to say that wartime is hours and days and weeks of pure boredom punctuated by moments of sheer terror.
Yeah, I've heard that, and I think that comes close to it. We used to say SWAT stands for sit, wait, and talk, because that's what
and
you
play
did.
Spades, right?
You play spades.
Did you play spades?
Yeah, we played. I think
of course.
hearts or spades or some game like that. But yeah, a lot of I'm trying to describe how to put words to it. Um, I would I would say almost like transitional or transformative for
Okay.
most of us who were there. I mean, it's a bond that you share with the guys on the team, and we look back at pictures now and think back that wow, that was that was crazy, and it could have for some of us it could have ended pretty tragically. I mean, I'll go ahead and share it because I had a moment towards the very end sitting on the side of a helicopter flying around that hit a wire, which we didn't know that's what had happened at the time. And as it was going down, my thought was, "Damn, what? Hope it doesn't hurt. Hope it doesn't hurt too much." But I guess that's it. What a shitty way to end. Like I never thought joining the FBI. I didn't have all these thoughts, obviously, in a few seconds of a helicopter going down. But um, I never thought joining the FBI as with an accounting background as an agent that I would die in a helicopter crash. By the grace of God, we landed properly, upright, never rolled over,
Oh,
and
wow.
everybody walked away. Um, and that was actually on April 15th. April 16th, the next day, I flew again. I think we finished that day, and then the order came down that no one will leave. You spend that weekend on site.
Before you get into that,
Sorry, I'm getting into.
no, because I heard something there. You literally survived a near wreck on a helicopter. It sounds like. How was it the next day getting on the helicopter? I mean, I would be kind of going, I'll drive.
Yeah.
I'll be over there.
When I guess I was 31 with probably the maturity of a 20-year-old. That's how you conduct life at that age. I don't know. No, I think I wouldn't say it was more of a, hey, I've got to do this. I've got to get back on the horse. I can't, I can't cower away from this. And I'm glad I did it.
Definitely. Okay. So then, I'm sorry, go ahead and continue. I just didn't want to leave that unaddressed.
Yeah. No. So anyway, so it was that we basically spent the weekend out there, what I would call on station or in your cars. And then on that Monday, the fateful Monday morning of April 19th, 1993 was when they initiated the raid, and we all watched, we watched from a few hundred yards away the place burn and went up afterwards. I, the memory, people say, like, with certain things like that, there's things you remember, and sometimes they talk about the smell, and the smell I remember, and it's going to sound really strange, the smell I remember was baked beans, because as you walked up to the smoldering remains, there was a pile probably 15 feet high, 12, 15 feet high of, I guess they're like 2-gallon cans of baked beans that were stored. And they were either, broken open or cooking. They were essentially cooking from the fire. And, so I remember that. And then, obviously there were some, little known fact, there were people who survived the fire who went down into a bus underground, who came up with their hands up hours after that we took into custody. But just beyond words. I mean, I don't think anything like that clearly nothing like that's ever happened in American history, and hopefully it never happens again.
Yeah, I've interviewed Gary Nosner, who was I believe the initial negotiator and got pulled off. It's a controversial event. I will say.
It should be.
I know. Yeah, I know he was very upset being pulled off of it, and I believe feels like it didn't have to go down quite that strongly. But I don't know how you feel or think, because you're sort of in the midst, like, a soldier sort of just sitting there in the field. I don't know.
No, I think there was a commission that came in afterwards. Danforth, I think it was Senator Danforth, did a pretty thorough review of it. And I mean, I think the conclusions were accurate and spot on. And probably a lot of what Gary also said and expressed his frustration was there was this discord or this disconnect between the negotiators and the tactical people on the ground, and with totally different missions. Now, that said, people would always say, well, at some point, you could just stay out there. There's no harm in having people staged up there for 6 months, a year, whatever, until they run out of food and decide to come out. On the surface, that I can see the logic in that. The reality is, and you know this from being in the Army, the more hours you put on a helicopter flying around, the more hours you're driving Bradleys up and down roads with turrets that spin, the more likely is you're going to have an accident, and potentially a fatal accident. I don't know that calculus went into the decision, but it's certainly something that, looking back on it, was, as evidenced by the helicopter crash 4 days earlier. I mean, at some point, the luck runs out, and we have that kind of accident. Now, nobody in the world could have foreseen how it ended. Obviously, there would have been different decisions made.
Did you? How did it affect you? Like, couple questions on this. Did you stay on the SWAT team after that point? And internally to the FBI, did you see any kind of procedural changes or training changes as a result of what went down?
Oh yeah. I mean, that fundamental. I stayed on the SWAT team and did some training with HRT later on from people, just from connections I made mostly during Waco. But I mean, after that, there was the siege. There were several sieges after, not as significant as Waco. I mean, there was the Freeman siege up in Montana. So this idea that they were going to tactically try to raid a compound or people held up was, I don't think anybody's ever thought to do it again like that. Other than in the case of where, okay, it's imminent, there's children being killed or people being hurt, then it's a different scenario. But when, and if you remember during Waco, I mean, they negotiated I don't remember the exact number. They got a lot of the kids out of there. They negotiated a lot of the kids out. A lot of other various people voluntarily left, or they got other people out. And there was, if I remember the dates, I mean, there was a drought there towards the end where nobody, like, they weren't letting anybody else out, and because there was some blood connection or something like that. But yeah, no, to answer your question, it was a hard lesson to learn, a sad lesson to learn, but certainly, the training, but more importantly, the strategy and the process, the decision making changed dramatically after that.
Which is good to hear, because Waco wasn't the only incident. Waco, and then Ruby Ridge. I can't remember the order.
Ruby Ridge was first. Ruby Ridge.
Okay, Ruby Ridge, yeah. And then Waco. It's like there's some controversies in the way things were handled, which ultimately led to Oklahoma City. Again, I'm not excusing. Correct. Obviously, he's a monster, but this really bad escalation between citizens and law enforcement, it is very frightening.
No doubt. And yeah, 2 years to the day in Oklahoma City, 163 people, were killed in that bombing. I think it's 160-ish.
Okay, so now we've been through the darkness, yeah. And I want to skip forward to a case that you're famous for now, sure. And technically it's a fraud, it's a scam, but it's kind of fun in a weird way. And that, of course, is the McDonald's Monopoly scam. I think you called it Operation Final Answer. Can we talk about that a
Oh,
little bit?
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Where do we start?
Well, okay, let's start with how you found out about it. Now, you were the not special agent in charge, but the squad supervisor, I believe, doing medical fraud cases.
Yeah, and so I'll just kind of bring you quickly up to speed. So yeah, so I got to Jacksonville, Florida in May of 2000 as the white collar crime supervisor. So I had a squad of, I don't know, 12, 13 agents and some analysts, and we really had you had priorities, right? So at the time, high priority was healthcare fraud. High priority was police corruption, government corruption, a couple others along the way in there. Fast food fraud or promotional game fraud. I don't even think there was a priority for that. So,
Well, were there sweepstakes frauds? I mean, there were other, like contests and things like that. I didn't. Is that unique, or have there been other ones?
I think there's, I'd have to do some internet research. I think there's been a couple of like lottery. It was pretty big, like lottery compromise subsequent to McDonald's. I mean, remember the McDonald's case was in really 2001, literally almost the whole year of 2001. If there's been promotional game fraud, it nowhere near the scope and magnitude of McDonald's, not one that went on for 20 plus years that involved way north of 50 people. So, I mean, I think we hold the record for promotional fraud,
which is incredible. And then I did want to know. I think you've been asked this before, and I'm wondering if the answer has changed. Were there actually any legitimate winners?
The working theory, we've not found any. Right now, when you say there were different levels of prizes, so somebody who got, let's say, a $500 award or even a $2,000 award, it wasn't. I think it was not worth the effort and the risk of the conspirators who were pulling this off to compromise those awards. They pretty much stuck with the 25. I think it was about 25,000 and up, which were considered major awards. There was, and I think most people at this point concede that this was the case. There was $1 million award that the main guy who perpetrated this, Jerry Jacobson, for whatever reason couldn't pull off the fraudulently placing the game to a co-conspirator. He ended up he says he donated it to St. Jude's, I think in Tennessee or Nashville somewhere, and St. Jude's says we got, somebody anonymously donated this thing to us. So
okay, so he did claim it or say, yeah, I did it.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah,
okay,
it is interesting. I mean,
you're in the office, I guess. Now, did you first hear about this, or did one of your agents first hear about this? I mean, how did it come on your radar?
Yeah. So I had, and if if anybody's watched McMillions, they certainly know Doug Matthews, who was the subtle, funny guy. Everybody loves it. I mean, most of the comments were, man, I'd love to work with this guy.
I see this note on the desk, McDonald's Monopoly fraud, and I go, give me that damn thing. Because I'm bored to death with this healthcare garbage, right? It's important, but I was ready to move on.
So Doug was a pretty new agent. He worked with a guy named Rick Dent, who was quiet, dour, senior guy. But the two of them really were, they were the workhorses of the squad. I mean, they were putting together, they had sources, they were working healthcare fraud. As a supervisor, these were the guys you never saw, which is counterintuitive because that means they're out doing work. The only thing you see from them is the paperwork coming in, which proves they're working. Other people, you see them all the time. They're in your office talking about whatever they want, a complaint or something, and you don't see any cases, you don't see paperwork. Doug and Rick, and I forget which one, maybe it was both, came in one day with this allegation that they had received from a source, informant that they had been working with on other related things. Basically, that the McDonald's Monopoly games were compromised and had been for years. And there was somebody, an Uncle Jerry, involved, and gave us a couple of names. That was, I'm going to say, December 2000, January 2001 time period. It was one of these things that kind of hard to believe, kind of far-fetched, right on the surface, right? You think, come on, there's no way, because a lot of times informants will tell you things just to stay informants, keep getting paid, or whatever, for whatever reason they do. If it was true, it'd be so significant. We had to do some due diligence to try to pull it together, verify this, vet what this guy was, the guy, girl, informant was saying. We did a little bit of due diligence and felt confident that we could reach out to McDonald's, and got a list of names, list of winners, and started digging in on them. And really, I call it the break, the thing that kind of proved it up. By this time, we had identified Jerry Jacobson, who didn't work for McDonald's, but he worked for a company called Simon Marketing, which contracted with McDonald's to run the games, print the pieces, place the pieces in circulation. Jacobson was the quote-unquote head of security for that company.
Can you tell me about Jerry Jacobson? His, a little biography, his background, basic info.
He once we figured out really who he was, because there was another Jerry involved in this, but that's
Columbo, right?
Yeah, Columbo. That's for the episode. And a lot of people say, like, well, did you ever, whatever happened to Columbo? Well, we knew Columbo was dead, and we were more concerned with the currents. Anyway, back to your question. So Jacobson had been a police officer in South Florida, one of the smaller PDs around Miami. He left. We later found out he left on a disability and moved up to Atlanta and got this job. There were allegations early on that he was a former FBI agent. He might have represented that to somebody who told somebody who told somebody. So that was, of course, that got our attention, but we figured out pretty quickly that that wasn't the case. So you had this guy Jacobson who was in charge of the pieces. And then you had a number of winners out there in all over the country. You got to connect them. So we pull phone records, expecting to see Jacobson calling winner Chris Graham in Oklahoma, whatever. Yeah. It's not there. But what we learned, or I learned during the days of working drugs, is the main kingpins don't talk to the street people. They talk to people in the middle. So you start looking for common phone numbers called. And when we lay out his calls and calls of winners, you see they're calling common people. And statistically, it's virtually impossible. That's your eureka moment that let us know, wow, this is no shit, a real thing.
Now, they didn't use burner phones or anything like that? I thought that would be common in the drug world, is burner phones, things to kind of make it more difficult for you.
Remarkably, no. There was, and at the time, again, we were fortunate because at the time, remember, this is 2000, phone records pretty easy to get, especially, cell phone records at the time. It was, people had cell phones, a cell phone company kept records of all the calls. I think you in some cases, you might have even paid for calls, paid for your minutes. So, you mentioned, like, why wouldn't they use burner phones? And you would think, and the reason I say this is because later on, when we went up on wiretaps into the summer, we'll get in, I'm sure you'll ask about that and get into that. They were Jacobson and a couple of the people that he was talking to, name just escaped me. Anyway, they were circumspect about what they were saying. They would use these like terms. I mean, it wasn't hard to figure out, but They would, hey, well, I've got the cake or something. Let's meet. Is your guy ready? I mean, things like that you could see pretty easy. So they were weirdly circumspect on phone calls, but not careful at all with, like you say, early on phone records and connectivity between winners.
Yeah, it just seems shocking that they would be that sloppy. But then they've been pulling it off for almost 20 years.
Yeah,
and could that be it? It's like we've been doing this so long, nobody knows anything, nobody cares, and who gives a damn? It's McDonald's anyway. It's not even real money; it's monopoly money.
That's right, and nobody is everybody's happy with how it was working out for them. Winners were getting their money, the recruiters in the middle were getting their cut, and Jerry was getting his cut. And I think you just pointed out, kind of victimless crime in a way, not really, but nobody's getting addicted to drugs because of this conspiracy. The mafia is not killing the other family member who's cut in on their trash business or something like that. I mean, this was a conspiracy that benefited really everybody. And I think that's why it went on for so long.
Even McDonald's, you bring up a good point, because even though the whole thing was a scam, McDonald's didn't know it was a scam, from what I understand, but they still benefited. They wanted to have a marketing situation that would help them sell product, and they sold a whole lot of product, even while the thing was a scam. So it almost is victimless in a weird way.
If somebody said, well, who are the victims in this? And subsequent to the case, I'm sure they all got settled quietly. There were some lawsuits against McDonald's in that, and I guess in the most simplest terms, the basis was, I went to McDonald's for years and years and years and bought Big Macs every Friday expecting to win, and there was no chance I was going to win, and you should have known better, and therefore you're liable for my high cholesterol and my
I was going to say destroying my health.
Yeah, my high cholesterol and the money I spent on Big Macs, or so I know there was a little bit of that chatter after the fact, but that was big business PR handling it.
Yeah, I guess Morgan Spurlock could have claimed with Super Size Me he was trying to win the McDonald's game, but it was never possible, so he had bad health effects, right?
My arm.
Are you sweating there?
My arms. I feel like I got some McSweats going. My arms got the McTwitches going in here from all the sugar that's going in my body right now.
Yeah. Is he still around?
No, he just died.
I know. I was going to say.
Recently, actually. And it could be. No, I'm just kidding.
We're opening a can of worms here. Maybe we got to go back and revisit this with a murder charge.
Competition of the documentaries.
Yeah.
McDonald's. It's overlap.
Superseding indictment for murder.
Wow. Okay. So one element of it that's interesting to me is you got all this information together. Talk briefly about Shamrock Productions, because that's just funny.
Yeah. So one of the things, I mean, in the McMillions documentary, to make it entertaining, there were things that were out of order. So it looked like the undercover, the Shamrock Productions, came up pretty early on. The reality was we had been up on this wiretap. We had put together a really strong historical case, somewhat, and then we had current winners. We had proven that up through the wiretap, but we needed there was a whole cast of characters, cast of winners from the past that we really had, other than phone calls. We really had nothing to stick them with in terms of a charge. So sort of started out where we envisioned a sort of a big wedding party of some sort in Vegas, like they do in the organized crime cases, invite everybody back and arrest them there. Well, that quickly morphed into this idea, like, let's conceive of a reunion of winners from the past, and we'll invite them back to Vegas, and that'll be where we arrest them. And as part of that, we will get them to retell their story, which was a lie, retell their story of how they got the piece and where they got it and how they won. We quickly figured out, well, it'd be nice to do this in Vegas, but you know what? We really don't even have to do it. We can pre-stage this with what you brought up, Shamrock Productions, which was a false production company, movie production company, that
with the tagline,
"'Cause you're just lucky," which was Mark Devereaux's edition, which I thought was so appropriate. And they went out and did, again, we've got some of them in the documentary. They went out and did pre-interviews of some of these past winners and had them tell their story, reenact in one case, reenact how the guy went to the beach. And
that was, by the way, I don't know if you've ever studied statement analysis at all. You probably have.
Oh, yeah.
In the FBI. That was a frameable statement analysis to watch, because he went through his elaborate, crazy ass story.
Day started out pretty peaceful. It was a day off, and I went to the beach for a while. I ended up actually falling asleep at the beach.
When all the, if the person was a legitimate winner, it'd probably be like, yeah, I was going to, get my lottery tickets on the way home. I do that every Wednesday. Went in there, bought it, got some snacks. It's like, oh my God, I won. It's like
the People magazine and my towel fell out of the backpack, fell into the water, and got all wet. I ended up throwing those away on the way to the car.
He's like doing this. I went to the beach and I did that, and then the magazine, and it swept out to the water and it was wet, and it was so hilarious, because the amount of time on the actual winning part is the super small part versus, that's the most important thing, but everything else overshadowed
Absolutely.
it. So
yeah, and
it was fascinating.
He was just adding those facts, to sound like he was being detailed. You're right. You're absolutely right. And there was another one, a guy named Buddy Fisher, who was also very vague about the day he won. It was sort of, and now he was a wreck because he was sweating, and he knew he couldn't have told a lie. He really seemed to be forced into talking about it. But yeah, no, it was. You're right. There was pretty. I mean, these were. I mean, most of these people didn't know who they were talking. Well, none of them knew who they were talking to. They'd probably never really been put on the spot to explain the how they won or how they got the piece. And then I think that was the brilliance of the Shamrock Productions thing, because if he came out and said, I'm Chris Graham, FBI, or Doug Matthews, FBI, you get a very different reaction out of people in that scenario. They're either gonna I don't want to talk to you, or I get a lawyer, or
well, that, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you won, you had this great event, and some production team wants to talk to you about it, it would look weird if you say, no, I just wish to remain private. I don't want to talk about it.
Exactly.
Everybody would look at you like, what's wrong with you? Why wouldn't you want to talk about it? This is amazing. I go my whole life, I don't have a good story like that, and you don't want to talk about it? So it kind of brought in, I think, a lot of social proof in a weird, or not social proof, but pressure on just trying to look normal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we didn't really have anybody say, I'm not interested in this. And again, a lot of the credit then goes to the team that was part of it, with Doug and Amy Murray from McDonald's, and the videographer.
Which is great. Now, okay, I'm going to fast forward, because one of the most interesting parts of the entire case is how it disappeared. And this is not the only one, not the only story that just got completely overshadowed.
It was around 2002, 2003. All the tabloids were carrying it. This game was a scam. McDonald's Monopoly game, a big scam. And nobody gave a whole lot of credit to it, only because it largely was carried by the tabloids.
We went from having all the resources I wanted, everybody in the office working on it, to within 24 hours. Well, 9/11 happened, and everybody in the office was working really 20 hours a day, all day, every day, running around trying to track down leads. But even a month or two after that, by that time, everybody was being reassigned to work on terrorism cases. I had another office to supervise that had some terrorism work, and that just kind of left Doug Matthews and Rick Dent and the prosecutor Mark Devereaux to press ahead with this. I think, separate or part of that, okay, it went away and no one cared about McDonald's anymore, obviously, because the world was facing a much more significant issue, was what happened later on in trial with pleas and with convictions and in the sentencing. Because I think the inclination of the court at the time was not to send somebody to jail for making a false statement about a promotional game, when, in light of what was going on in the world with 9/11 and the terrorism threat. I mean, it really sort of threw white collar crime and financial crime way to the back burner for many years.
Yeah, I'm looking now, and from what I understand, Jerry Jacobson was released in 2006, so we're talking 5 years, and he's paying restitution on scamming over $24 million. He's paying $370 a month.
Yeah, I saw that, and that's... Yeah.
Wow. I mean, that seems to be kind of negligible here in terms of that, and a light sentence. So if, now this is pure speculation, but you handled other financial crimes pre 9/11, would his sentence have been that light had it have happened a year or two prior?
So the courts use sentencing guidelines to work up sentences, and there's some discretion there. Jacobson pled guilty, so he gets reduction points, things like that. That said, I think not. I had a case when I was in San Antonio, a telemarketing case on a boiler room that was terrorizing old people. Case went to trial. The main guy was a guy named Cheryl Landis. He had a criminal history, but was convicted at trial along with some of his co-conspirators who also worked in this boiler room. He was in his 60s. He got what I call a life sentence. I mean, I think it was a 12-year sentence, and he died in jail after 6-7 years. I mean, 12 years in the penitentiary was, and the loss was nowhere near the 20 million or so. I think it was a tenth of that, maybe. Now, go back to your original point about victims. The victims of the telemarketing were, I mean, if you wanted to do a dictionary description of a financial crime victim, these were spot on. I mean, these were vulnerable elderly people who were taken advantage of, and usually in many cases lost way more than they could afford to lose, if not everything. And, I feel, anyway, so yeah. So to answer your question, I think, yeah, but I think the pendulum has swung back a little bit on financial crime sentencings. You've seen some pretty last few years with, some pretty significant ones. I mean, Madoff.
Well, Madoff is, yeah. I mean, now we're getting into billions, not even millions. I mean, I think there's billions that are scammed on that. Fascinating there. I do want to ask you briefly. I understand, and I have not had an opportunity to look into it, but you were involved in another case about the Klan and infiltrated Grand Nighthawk. And okay, first I got to throw something out there, because some of the circles I travel in, there are commentaries saying that if you're looking at any clan gathering, probably one or two people there will be a Fed. That's kind of a perception of how deeply infiltrated a lot of the white supremacists, Aryan, all these groups are. You worked this particular case, which I don't know if it's full-on clan or not, but could you address my first thought? Is that exaggerating things? And then the second, can we talk about that case?
No, it's not exaggerating. There's a Fed in every clan meeting, so they should probably disband right away and go their separate ways. No, I'm that's a public service announcement. That's I mean, there's a reason for that perception or for that statement, as evidenced by this case and several others. We see a level of paranoia amongst these groups that is based on probably what you're saying, that you never know. They never know who's on their side and who's on the right side of the law. There's also what we saw, at least in Grand Nighthawk early on, was there's competition among these factions and these groups too. You would think everybody's wearing the same KKK varsity jersey. Even within the groups, they're bickering and fighting, and there's personality problems, and somebody doesn't like that guy because he's in charge of this group. So it's kind of we saw, at least there, it was kind of a fragmented group. Didn't stop them from hiring or tasking our informant to go kill, an innocent black guy who had really done nothing other than get into a little tussle with a prison guard.
Okay, so the basic case was an inmate got into a beef with a guard, and they planned to assassinate him.
Yeah, and it's. I think. So Grand Nighthawk, I think it was George Stephanopoulos' production, hour long. I think they did a great job of pulling together a whole lot of content and telling the story without going down political, without making statements, without going down rabbit holes or speculation, anything like that. So that's my pitch for Grand Nighthawk. Long and short of it is, a couple of these guys worked as correctional officers in one of the, I think it was Lake Butler, one of the Florida state prisons here. The victim, like I want to say Williams, I have my notes in front of me. They had a little tussle, I think, over a cigarette or something like that. 18 months earlier, victim gets out of jail, moves back to Palatka, spends his days fishing. I mean, this guy's not going back and running some big drug ring or anything like that. I mean, very, very, I hate to say, simple, humble kind of guy. These officers couldn't let it go. And, we had pretty good, we had a source, and he's in the show. He's come forward. Good guy. Joe Moore. And he had, even before this task to kill the former inmate, he had kind of worked himself into a position of trust within one of these groups. He represented that he had military experience, and they appointed him kind of the head security guy, the Grand Nighthawk, as it were, and trusted him to carry out this murder. And like McDonald's, it just seemed so far-fetched. Like, come on, you're kidding me. 18 months earlier, I mean, the guy, again, you're always skeptical. What's this? Is this source spinning things, or is he exaggerating things? And we did a couple of consensual recordings with the guys who, Moran and one of the others. And it spot on, exactly what he was saying. They wanted this guy dead, and they had done some. They talked about how to do it. They talked about injecting him with insulin, letting him die by the riverside, talked about some of the logistics of where he was during the day, etc. And I mean, it's literally, it's almost right out of kind of textbook 101 or Hollywood. So we basically staged the murder, put together, obviously contacted the victim, explained what we needed to do, took pictures of him on the ground with fake blood, made it so, you know, he urinated himself, everything.
That is part of making the case, right? I think I might have heard you talking about it, or somebody, that ideally, yes, you can get people offering to commit a particular crime, but if you offer a staged completion of the crime, it kind of locks them in further. Can you explain that?
People can talk about killing people all they want. And so, and then the next step is, all right, I want you to kill this person, you know, do it this way. But if it never happens, yeah, they say, well, I was only joking. This was, you know, this was idle chatter. We were just speculating. When you have it done and they gleefully boast about it and laugh about it in front of that picture, yeah, you've locked it down. You've put the bow on that present.
I'd love to talk to you again if you were available and maybe break down a couple more cases. But Chris, thank you so much.
Absolutely. It's fun. One of the things that's nice about being retired and getting to do these things is no one else around here wants to listen to my stories. So,
Well, we definitely do.